Hey, how about it, race fans? Richard Allen of motorsportsreport.net coming at you with one of my Rich's ramblings. And I think today's Rich's rambling is going to be a whole lot different from the last one that I did back there a couple of weeks ago. But of course, yesterday, if you've checked on motorsportsreport.net or pretty much just about any other site that covers dirt racing, you've probably seen that it's now official. Something had been rumored for weeks and months up until yesterday, but on yesterday, August the 1st, it was made official that the 411 Motor Speedway has been sold and in all likelihood will no longer serve as a racetrack. It'll that property will have some new function here in the future. So I was just going to talk a little bit about that and maybe about what it possibly means about or for dirt racing in general, not just track specific to 411. It's another East Tennessee track that's closed. Over the last couple of decades or so, we've seen a number of East Tennessee tracks be shut down for one reason or another. Go way back there, 25 years ago. Atomic Speedway, which is if you ask people who followed dirt racing for a long time and talk about East Tennessee, Atomic Speedway is going to be a name that always comes up. But of course, it went away several years ago. Then in the more recent time, you had Cleveland Speedway to go away, as well as Boyd Speedway, which I know Boyd's really technically in Georgia, but it was so close to the Tennessee line that we kind of adopted it into East Tennessee. And of course, now you got 411 Motor Speedway. So immediately when something like that happens, people want to ask why. Why is this happening? Why did this track shut down? Why did this track close? What went wrong? And it's not always necessarily that something went wrong. There could be other reasons for it. But if you'd asked me 5 years ago, what are the tracks you think that are the least likely to be shut down? 411 would have been at the top of that list. I would have guessed any number of other tracks, not just East Tennessee, but nationally, that would have shut down before 411. I always pictured it kind of the sort of a poster child of well-run tracks. Mitch McCarter and his family and the team that they had together, they ran a very organized show, and it seemed to always be doing well. So I would have never guessed that 411, we'd be sitting here today talking about I guess most likely the demise of 411 as a racetrack, and I just honestly didn't really see that coming. So like I said, a few weeks or months ago when this speculation started, I was pretty much caught off guard. And keep in mind, I live within about, 3-4 miles of 411. I mean, it's just right there, and it's kind of sad driving by it over the last couple of days. Like one day I drove by and I saw the Packer vehicles being taken out on flatbed trucks. And yesterday I had to go to Knoxville and passed by a couple of flatbeds that were hauling the old water trucks away and all that, which definitely signaled the end there for sure. It kind of put an exclamation mark on the end of the track, and that was sad to see. But if you think about it, and if you want to ask what went wrong, and let's say not necessarily anything went wrong, but each track that's closed kind of has its own circumstances that brought it about. Sometimes it's the property value. Simply put, the property value is just too great to sit there as a racetrack, something that will only be used 15 times a year, maybe 20 times a year, as opposed to getting much more value out of that property. I think Atomic Speedway being right there on I-40 is a good example of that. Now it's basically, I don't think call it a truck stop. It's a trucking depot, I guess now. And as far as the property goes, it was just too valuable to continue to use it as a racetrack. And there are other situations like maybe the age or the health of the owner. I know a lot of people don't want to hear this, but there aren't a lot of folks lined up clamoring to run a racetrack. And just because you're a papaw ran a track that was pretty successful doesn't necessarily mean that the children or the grandchildren want to run that racetrack, because it's a lot of hard work. I mean, a lot of hard work. And it's always a big gamble. I mean, you could have some big race coming up and you've ordered all the concessions and all the stuff that's got to go in, put all the prep work into running this big race, and then out of the blue a thunderstorm shows up and you're canceled. So there's a lot of risk, maybe some reward too, but there's definitely a lot of risk involved, and there's just not a lot of people dying to own these things and take the risk that goes with them. So sometimes the age or the health of the track owner. I think not inside East Tennessee, but the East Bay Raceway Park down in Florida. Al Varnador's just he's just ready to retire, and apparently and again, it's one of those situations where the property's too valuable to continue using it as a racetrack. It can serve other functions. So that track's going away for its own circumstances. And there are other examples. Cleveland Speedway sat right next to car dealerships who weren't happy about the fact that there was a racetrack right there, every Friday or Saturday night, scattering dust into the air that was winding up on their cars. And that Cleveland Speedway property is not really, the last time I drove by there anyway, it's been a while, not really being used for anything. But there's environmental concerns that maybe keep it from being used for anything. But it's not a racetrack, which some of its neighbors are probably not disappointed about. So there's just all kinds of reasons that why tracks shut down. And the real story, and I touched on this the last time I did one of these, has to do with the evolution of dirt track racing. As much, your political views don't matter. COVID changed everything. No matter how real you think COVID was, or vaccines, or none of that matters. COVID changed our society, and it changed dirt racing dramatically, because promoters and, more importantly, streamers realized that there's a lot of money to be made out there in streaming. So the streamers really, essentially, because of COVID, streaming was around before COVID, but because of COVID, streaming just really took off. And now there's so many streaming options out there that you can watch racing. A lot of regional series have their own streaming network. The national series have their own streaming networks. So that evolution is changing everything. And now this sport, because of that, has evolved into a big event sport. Where, a few years ago when I first started covering this, my history doesn't go that deep in this. I started covering this in 2008. When I first started covering, you had a 10,000 to win race. That was huge. Nowadays, it's common. In some cases, 10,000 to win races are kind of ignored by the competitors. Why would I go race for 10,000, run a risk of tearing something up or blowing a $40,000, $50,000 motor when next week there's going to be a 50,000 somewhere, 75,000 somewhere? So, the purses have gotten bigger. Now 20,000's more like kind of the bottom that you'll get the big stars to show up for if it's not a sanctioned race. And because of that big event mentality, it's really cutting into the weekly programs. People would, if you think about it, if you are paying, say, $29.99 a month for some streaming service, $39.99, whatever you're paying, and you think, I'm paying that every month no matter what, whether I watch it, whether I don't watch it, I'm paying that. Why would I get in my car and drive 45 minutes down the road to go watch a not particularly big event, have to stand in line for a restroom, stand in line for concessions, when I can turn on the stream and see Davenport and Overton and O'Neill and Thornton and Pierce, the refrigerator's right there. I don't have to stand in line, use my own restroom, and when it's over, I turn it off and go to bed. I don't have to drive 45 minutes back home. So it's really the current state of affairs are really digging into weekly shows. And then here that shows up when you're talking about these tracks and why they close. There are some tracks that really depend on having a healthy weekly show to keep themselves in business. And without those healthy weekly shows, you're not selling concessions, you're not selling T-shirts at the vendor. And of course, obviously, you're not getting people to come through the gate, and you're not getting your competitors to pay at the pit gate, because there's just not much weekly racing. A few weeks ago when Bubba Pollard raced at I-75 in a Southern Nationals race, I talked to him about pavement racing, and he talked about how basically there is no weekly pavement racing. You find very few weekly pavement tracks. Pavement racing has evolved into a big race sport with the Cars Tour and all the other stuff that they've got going on. Now people, and again, streaming's a big part of that too. Pavement racing has streaming just like dirt racing does. So, and I'm not anti-streaming, by the way. It may come off like that, but I watch dirt racing streams all the time, almost throughout the summer, almost on a daily basis. I'm watching them, and I have found myself, even as involved in racing as I am, I've found myself going to fewer races in exchange for watching the streams. And I know a lot of fans are making that decision too. So without, like I said, it's digging into some tracks rely on the weekly to stay healthy financially, to justify having that property. It's hard to justify, okay, we're going to have this property, we're going to use it as a racetrack, and we're only going to use it 6 nights a year. The other, basically 360 days a year, it's just going to sit here idle. And I got to mow it. If some storm happens, I've got to go look after the storm damage. I've got to pick up the trash after those few days or the few racing days have happened. So it's hard to justify owning an expensive piece of property for that. I've still got to pay taxes on the property. All that stuff is going on. So in my opinion, the 411 closure is just indicative of where we are. It's what racing has become. I can foresee this, like, I know people don't like comparisons to NASCAR, but you go back, say, 40 years ago in NASCAR, and 40 years ago, there were still some NASCAR tracks that were running like weekly shows. I know Martinsville did for a long time, and North Wilkesboro and places like that. But now they have evolved. They're just big event tracks. Those Charlotte Motor Speedway, they used it all the time for various things, driving schools and stuff like that. But as far as actual racing, it's used just a few times a year. And so, or Talladega, or any of those tracks like that, they're just used a few times a year. I can foresee a time when dirt racing becomes like that, where there are many fewer tracks hosting big events only. And, for some people that might not matter that much. But for others, that's a deep wound because, they really like that feel of that weekly show and going having that identity with those drivers that they watch on a weekly basis. But we're just heading in a different direction. Not a better direction, not a worse direction. It's just a different direction. Like I said, the 411 Speedway closure to me just exemplifies that. But anyway, so those are just my thoughts. You may have totally different thoughts. You can certainly add your comment in the space below or on X at Richard Allen MSR. Instagram, I'm on there. The motorsportsreport.net has a Facebook page, so you can certainly come on, add your thoughts there as well. But anyway, this is Richard Allen of motorsportsreport.net saying, I'll see you at the track, hopefully.